I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time.
I mean, Trump is going gangbusters in the polls right now.
The Kamala interview with Bret Baier on Fox News, highlighting how disastrous some of her answers were.
She stood up to him. She's running for president. What do you mean she stood up? Like she's standing up to the bully. She's running to be the most powerful person in the world.
It's hard to know if she even wants this. That's the vibe I get.
It almost perfectly coincides with Charlie XCX tweeting that brat summer is over.
Brat season is long over. Coconut season, it maybe was just a mirage the whole time. The trees are barren. The coconut water we are out. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. We're talking about the Kamala Harris interview on Fox News, obviously. We are talking about Elon Musk grabbing the rocket with giant tweezers and the reaction to that, and also the California government. Well, I guess it's like the unelected board, whatever, war on him. Brandon's going to break that down in a minute. We have our Polymarket segment coming up where we're going to talk about the odds that Kamala or Trump appear on Joe Rogan, which very interesting developments there. And also, I think a broader read of the culture right now, which I really am looking forward to talking about. And we got our Pirate Idol. The final quarterfinal is upon us. So sit tight for that. We've got 3 returning guests, the last 3 of the round. Very first thing we got to do is, I mean, Trump is going gangbusters in the polls right now, and also the betting market. I mean, he's edging up in the polls, and then the betting markets just have him, especially like you look at Poly, just the stories nonstop online, blowing him out of the water. This morning I saw, I think it was a 62% chance of him winning according to the betting markets. Now, this isn't science, and who knows, but it's a very good indication because people have so much money on the line. Because of that, there's been a pretty interesting reaction on the Kamala side of things, which is, and it's to me is rational. She has to take some desperate measures. 2 of those measures include, 1, a lot of free shit for black men just promised, which we could talk about in a minute. Black men specifically and only, like very, very, let's just like be clear. Black men only are getting these loans. And number 2, interviews f***ing everywhere. So the biggest of them all, I would have said, I mean, we talked a little bit about the one that was kind of quasi-stealth edited last week, but the Fox News interview with Bret Baier is one of the most important interviews, I think, of the election season so far. Riley, why don't you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, sure thing. So like you mentioned, a lot of interesting things happening on the campaign trail right now. Polymarket showing Trump with 62% odds of winning. Kamala putting out policy proposals geared towards black men. One of those proposals including legalizing recreational marijuana to, quote, create opportunities for black Americans to succeed in this new industry, which, as I wrote in the Daily, sounded pretty freaking racist to me. Other interesting developments, though, Tim Walz really trying to play up his folksy appeal by saying he doesn't know what a venture capitalist does. So I guess the Constitution and venture capital, 2 pretty foreign areas to Tim Walz. But really notable was, like you mentioned, the Kamala interview with Bret Baier on Fox News, which just absolutely made waves on X, with many on the right and even just like across the board highlighting how disastrous some of her answers were, including on questions about Joe Biden's health, the border, whether or not the country was on the right or wrong track. Although I do have to point out that Kamala did have a few defenders, including my favorite, Mark Cuban, who described that interview as Kamala, quote, standing up to Bret Baier with force and never backing down. So yeah, what do you guys think? Was that a sign of force for Kamala?
She stood up to him. She's running for president. What do you mean she stood up? Like she's standing up to the bully. She's already the VP. She's running to be the most powerful person in the world. And we have to like coddle her feelings and be like, she did a good job fighting back against the bad reporter. I give her props. I think that the truth is Trump has not, to the best of my knowledge, done an interview with MSNBC, has he?
I mean, he went in front of like the Black Association of Journalists and got grilled for.
Okay,
an hour.
that he
I mean,
did
he's
do.
Definitely,
Yeah, that was
done
wild.
hostile interviews.
That was a wild one. But he's not, out there talking to Rachel Maddow. I guess Rachel Maddow's also on a very different level than Brett's a real journalist. Rachel's a talking head. But I give her some credit for going into such a hostile place. I mean, Fox, just turn it on. I mean, it's like 24/7 Kamala Sucks channel. So there is some credit due there to go in and face them. But she was not prepared, and I'm not going to buy. It wasn't just Cuban. You saw this reaction. I went on Threads for that pure shit. And what I saw was really, I think, a group of people looking at someone who they support handling not a hostile, but just a very hard interview with someone who's not completely bought in on the propaganda for the first time ever. They'd never seen Kamala in a situation like that, whereas people on the right see Trump in situations like that all the time. Not on MSNBC, the true, like, as far left as you can go, but he's getting hostile or difficult interviews like constantly. It's sort of what he famously is getting attacked by the media and fighting back and saying fake news. It's been, part of his identity. So they were shocked and they were bothered, but we did learn a lot. So I have notes here because I started watching and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I almost don't want to go too hard because she seems nice, and I want to encourage this kind of thing, going out and doing the interviews. I like when Pete Buttigieg goes on Fox. I think he does really well typically. I would like to see Trump do more really, really difficult interviews with the left, but I think it was just really a disaster. So let's see. Immediately she's asked about immigration. She brings up the fact that she had a bill that they tried to pass, within hours of inauguration.
The first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the...
Finish?
Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're raising,
okay,
and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority.
And the bill she's talking about was like mass amnesty for over 10 million illegal aliens, right? That was her solution to the border. She defended the sex change operations for prisoners thing, where defending maybe is the wrong word. She was just like, I will follow the law. She refused to say she wouldn't do it anymore. She did say my presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. So Bret asked her specifically about the comments she made on The View, where she said she wouldn't change anything, which is wild because they're running as a change. She's running as a change candidate. You have Tim Walz up on stage saying, we can't handle 4 more years of this, referring to Biden's presidency. And she's saying she wouldn't change anything and that she was responsible for every major decision. But here she was saying, it's not going to be a direct continuation. It's going to be a little more bipartisan. I'm going to work with Republicans. For me, the highlight, a lot of people are focusing on the immigration stuff, and I understand why, because it was just such a disaster for her. She had no way to defend herself and what they did. And when the questions were framed to her and her response, it's like she had not even thought about how to answer it at all. It just looked really damning. It looked like, wow, we're for sure going to have open borders forever if she is the president. But for me, the most interesting part of the whole interview was when she was asked about President Biden's senility. Bret Baier was like, when did you realize that he was mentally impaired? Which is a crazy question to ask her, and something that is so important to ask her because she has been working with him for years, telling us that this man is mentally okay. Which, okay, whatever, she's lying. All politicians lie. That's not so scandalous. I mean, it's terrible. Maybe it should be more scandalous than it is, but I'm used to these people lying to get whatever they want, which is power.
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Bret, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And
but
Donald Trump
But
is.
you talked about it.
And Donald Trump
Actor George Clooney said
and
within a
if
few
you
minutes of
watch
talking to President
Donald
Biden at a
Trump-
fundraiser that he thought this was not the same
Brett,
Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand.
What's crazy in this situation is she then used his senility, all the Democrats did, as a reason to switch her in as president with no election, which we've never seen in my lifetime. We've never seen a primary circumvented like that before. So that's a huge deal. And the only way that you make that work is if you're actually saying, like, this man is impaired, and she's basically just, I mean, you're trying to have it both ways right now. And it's like, if you're being switched in for this reason, when did you know that he was so bad, and why didn't you do anything about it? And she was stumped, man. She had nothing she could say to that. I thought that was for me the moment. There were, some other good things in here. I'm scrolling through my notes. There was the January 6th thing, which maybe we talk about in a second, which people are saying that Trump's threatening to use the military against people who vote against him or something now. I saw this New York Times op-ed to this effect. It's now a Democratic talking point. It's total bullshit. There's the Iran question, which I didn't really care about. And then there's the idea that Bret wouldn't let her speak, which I am of two minds on. It's like, I did want her to speak, but also she was just giving talking points, and I really wanted answers to some of these questions. I really want to know when her mind changed on the border. I really want to know what it was that made her change her mind on the border, and what she would do with these policies if she had to do it over again. Like, I want to know those things so I can make a decision about this woman. And I really want to know about the Biden stuff. But all in all, yeah, total disaster. Democrats, of course, calling it either a victory for them or this horrible attack from Fox News. She went on Fox News. She knew it was going to happen. She wasn't prepared. And I would say that's it. Like, she's cooked, but who knows? Riley, what did you think? Well, did you watch it? Did you watch the whole thing?
Yeah, and I sort of agree with you on the topic of Bret Baier sort of talking over her. It sort of just reaffirmed for me that, like, the podcast format is just so much better than these, like, quick hit cable interviews. Like, I saw Bret Baier saying after the fact that, like, right from the jump, Kamala's team was trying to wrap things up, basically. Like, you can't get down to any sort of substance in that sort of, like, tightly compressed environment. And so, like, yes, Kamala's answers were pretty bad and showed that she hasn't been tested, like you mentioned. But there were times when it did sort of, like, just get into, like, shouting match territory. And I think that in a long form, format, like a podcast, with a host that isn't like the Call Her Daddy host, Kamala's weaknesses will actually be highlighted even further. So yeah, I definitely would have liked this to be 2 hours and not like 20 minutes.
I agree. Like, if you got to let her get through the talking points. Maybe that's the way that you do it. And you just need more time for that, which is not a big ask for someone running for president. And it's really, it's sad I think it's actually, we can talk about this in a moment. I want to hear, all of Brandon's thoughts as well. And we have more to discuss on this topic before we move on to Poly, but I actually think it's better now than it was 8 years ago. But yeah, I think it's like, you need more time, and it's not just like, oh, because I want to hear her talk about more things. It's like, you need more time because you actually have to bleed these candidates of all of their bullshit. And once their bullshit is out, it's like they have nothing left to do but talk to you like a human. And then it's very simple. It's like, tell me about catch and release. Tell me about the COVID era restrictions that you removed. Tell me about your plan moving forward for what you want the immigration system to be. You say it's broken. Like, how do you plan to fix it? Really? How many people should be coming in? Should it be a lottery system? Should we be letting in more engineers or something? Like, tell me something that's going on in that head of yours. Brandon.
Yeah, I wonder why she doesn't do that. Like, she's had months to come up with the policy positions on these issues. Her staff could be doing that. She could memorize them and just say them in an interview. I didn't watch the interview. I kind of like feel for her.
Yeah, I did too.
Being a presidential candidate or a politician has to be so stressful. I mean, just imagine going up against Bret Baier or whoever, who are just like professional interviewers. They're very tricky. They're very clever. And I'm not totally convinced that type of format there's that it really gives much. Like being good at interviews like that, I don't know. I think it's good for a president to have that skill, but I don't know that it's like the core competency you need to be a good president.
I agree.
So I would kind of just echo Riley's point. I think the podcast format is a little bit better because even with somebody like Rogan, who's like generally a very empathetic individual, he I feel like he sort of, what's the word, like engenders himself. Is that the right word, to the guest? He's very likable, and he kind of like, he goes along with what they're saying, and he pulls stuff out of the guest. And I think, at the very least, I think you do want a candidate who can give its constituents confidence that they actually have a plan, and that they're relatively competent, and that their plan is a sort of competent way to attack the issues that its constituents are worried about. But I don't know that like the Fox News interview format and all of those types of formats are like the best way to go about, sort of illustrating that.
I think that I agree with that. I think that there could be something like, she had time to say something. It was 30 minutes. Like there was time to say something. And the real thing that she needs to do is it's time to throw Biden under the bus. And she's not doing that. She is trying to say that she's a different president, but she's refusing to criticize Biden for any reason. I don't understand that at this point. I don't know. I mean, she's pivoted to the right. She's talking about how she owns a Glock. She's like, I prosecuted people at the border or whatever. She's Mrs. Border Police person now, deport them. I mean, I don't think she's actually said anything about deportation yet. But she's generally speaking she's made this massive pivot. Why not say, ignore everything I said in 2019. I had my eyes opened, over the last 4 years, watching what happened to this country. We made a lot of mistakes that I would not have made had I been president, and I won't make now. I love Joe. His heart was in the right place. I think it was from where he started. I could understand why he made that decision. It was proven to be incorrect. We should have never done X, Y, and Z, or he should have never done X, Y, and Z. What I will do moving forward is, this other thing over here. And she just doesn't, I think she's very afraid to offend anybody right now because she's losing. And when you're losing, it's like, you don't want to lose your base. You don't want to lose the support of the party. I think she doesn't know what to do. And when you say that you feel bad for her, I feel that way too. I don't think that she really wants this. I think that I read some rumor that like she has insomnia right now. She's just having a really hard time sleeping. And that was the first time I had like empathy. I was like, oh yeah, like, because I would be a nervous wreck if I was running for president and I was getting criticized, just constantly. And again, she's put herself in this position. So of course that's a important thing to keep in mind. But she talks about a restaurant once. I've talked about this before on the podcast. She talks about how she wants to own a little restaurant where they just make, I think, one dish and they just serve a certain amount of them. And then once they're done with them, they're done for the day. And it's like such a Northern California dream. Like she's in Napa and she's represented Northern California forever in San Francisco. And I know the vision that I can see it. I want to go there. I want to go to that restaurant. I want, for her and for me, I want this dream to happen for her. I think she'd be great at it. She told us what she wanted and was not running for the presidency. This happened to her. I wonder, had there been an open primary season, earlier, I wonder if she would have even have run. I really do, because it just does not seem like her heart is in it. And
I have that feeling as well. I don't. It's hard to know if she even wants this. That's the vibe I get.
It's like other people want it for her so badly, and I understand that too, which is where my empathy comes in. Really, like the idea that the crowd is begging you to do something. She has all these Democrats who think Donald Trump is Hitler, and they're like, "Please save us." And you have these people like really begging you to do this, and they needed the money. She was already on the ticket, so she was able to use the money that was raised. And there were all these common sense reasons why it made sense that it just had to be her from the Democratic perspective. But like, no one ever asked her, like, Kamala, baby, do you want this?
Do you think that's the main reason, the money? Because aren't there these rumors that Obama never wanted Kamala? And wanted maybe to do an open primary.
Yeah, there are. So I actually don't know. Maybe I'm just projecting. Maybe if I were in a position, I wouldn't want it. And I would want that restaurant. Maybe that's what I want now. I'm like over this. Moving on to our Polymarket segment with our great partner, Polymarket. Thank you guys for helping us do what we do over here, which is shit talk and explore the news. I want to talk about this podcast stuff. With less than 3 weeks to Election Day, Polymarket is showing a 73% chance of Trump and a 33% chance of Kamala Harris appearing on Joe Rogan's podcast before the election. Rogan has previously only featured long shot candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., Bernie Sanders, and Andrew Yang. Either interview would be Rogan's most consequential political episode yet. But if you ignore Rogan himself and think about the power of a podcast like this in general, Kamala's been on Call Her Daddy, Trump going on Flagrant, Rogan coming up. This is sort of like the podcast election. We've never seen so much importance ascribed, I think correctly, to these alternative media entities. Call Her Daddy, I think it was silly when the right wing went after her, which I think, Riley, you pointed out very astutely. It was meaningful for her to go on there, and it did make sense for her to go on there to reach all of these people. And it will make sense if they go on Rogan. I think what you're really seeing here is just a kind of acquiescence to the new media norms of our country, which we haven't seen before. We haven't seen anybody sort of acknowledge, any major candidate or both major candidates in an election acknowledge that this is what we are doing now. So, Trump was on the All In pod. We've seen this, all this election. It's a huge deal. What did you guys make of the trend? Or what do you make of the trend?
It's a really interesting pivot, I think, on the left, because I remember when Bernie Sanders was sort of like playing up Rogan's support. I think this was in like the 2020 primary. And he just got like eviscerated on the left because people were like, Rogan is sexist, Rogan's an anti-vaxxer, how dare you? And now that Kamala is like way underwater with male voters, they're singing a completely different tune. And I just think that's a really interesting pivot because she's, so struggling with that demographic.
It's not just the Rogan thing of it. It's like Sanders was this outsider, kind of fringe, countercultural candidate. So him going on a podcast, let's remove Rogan from it. It would have been not as crazy. This is a centrist. Well, she's running as a centrist Democrat. She's certainly the machine Democrat. The machine Democrat owns the institutions. They own the media. They shouldn't need this, right? So if they're reaching in for Rogan, that says to me that they feel like they need it. They need not just Rogan, but they need the podcast audience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is what is she going to say on Joe Rogan that's any different than what she said in her media appearances in other podcasts?
Well,
I don't
sure
know how
they'll
the
talk about
calculus
weed.
works. Yeah, maybe they'll talk about weed.
Well, so do you guys think she's going to get? Do you think she'll go on? Do you think she'll go on the show on Rogan?
I think things
she's got to do something. Sorry, Riley, what was that?
I think things would have to get like pretty desperate, because even though I don't think people would come at her the same way they came at Bernie for going on Rogan, I still think there might be some, pushback on Rogan himself. And so I think in order to avoid that, she might only go on if things are really, really looking dicey for her. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
I'm just imagining her with him now, and he's going to be like, so this like trans prisoner thing. You really think that? You really think that? And she'd be like, boilerplate answer. Like, but come on, just say it was crazy. Can't you just say it was crazy? You don't believe it anymore. You never did. Like, can't you just say that? And then she has a boilerplate answer, and then he does it again, and it's like, you got to say something. Maybe she does. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think she will do it. I think she should do it. I think she needs a Hail Mary. I think that she needs to connect with people, not just men and not just people who are not her supporters now, but her supporters. The joy, Riley, I've been noticing this thing that we do when we're working on the daily. You're still using coconut. I used to call her Little Coconut, and I haven't felt the desire it doesn't feel right anymore for me. So like when I'm writing it, I've dropped that because it doesn't resonate the way that it did, 2 months ago for me, where it really felt like that was a great nickname. It did evoke so much of what she represented and like how she was meeting the press and the world. It's not it is no longer, the joy is Brat season is long over. Coconut season, it maybe was just a mirage the whole time. The trees are barren. The coconut water we are out. And now people are looking for steak. And she does know how to cook it, but I don't see any in the fridge. And that is what we are looking for now. And because people on her team don't see that, I think that they're getting demoralized. I think that they are really feeling like they're going to lose. And so she needs to make them happy. She needs to give them something really exciting, or this is over, I think. Because the Trump people, they're voting for him. They're going in and they're not going to sit home on election day. She needs people to be as excited as they are.
If I was Kamala, I would stop immediately doing any hardball interviews or any, and I would not do the Rogan interview. I would pivot to lifestyle propaganda. I would just get, segments where a very friendly interviewer is following me while I cook a nice meal for my husband, wine tasting, things like this. I think she can connect with, I like that aspect of her personality. She seems like a super chill lady to hang out with, and she's like fun. I think that's her best shot. I think she's cooked on policy because she doesn't have it, and she seems not very competent, frankly, in policy. And every time she talks about policy, she contradicts herself or says something really incoherent.
Well, she just doesn't care. She clearly doesn't care because she's changed. I was thinking about this the other day. We have never seen a presidential candidate who has changed their position so much on things. I mean, a wide range now of the sort of the border, the economy, law and order, the Second Amendment. Like, this is a woman who is pro buybacks, mandatory buybacks, now talking about her Glock and like giggling about it on screen, which is great. Like, that interview was a great moment for her. But it's like, she doesn't care. She cares about winning. And that's like, there are different kinds of politicians. There are two, really. There's the ideological creature, and there is the sort of state,
like the California model of a politician.
The California model, which is what Kamala is, which is like, you just do what you have to do to win, and then you hold power. And I don't even know why they want it, other than, that's a whole other question. But give this woman a pot and let her make some fucking braised lamb shanks and talk about whatever. Yeah. Like, I really do think she would everything would change if she was imagine her casually like stirring a pot of food, being not focused on you but the food, talking about like nuclear disarmament or something. I am so engaged right now in this fantasy. Give it to me. Riley, you were about to say something about Charlie XCX.
Oh, it was on the topic of you saying the coconut thing in decline. It almost perfectly coincides with Charlie XCX tweeting that Bret summer is over. So
right.
Be really interesting to see the poll since she tweeted that.
I wonder why she said that too. That was weird, where she was like, fuck it, I'm popping this bubble. I am not going down with this sinking ship. This woman promised me some kind of like, well, what did she promise? I mean, it was all an illusion. It was all just people projecting their own shit onto her. Again, I feel bad for Kamala. Poor Kamala. Poor sad Kamala. Sorry, Kamala. We're moving on. Elon Musk. We had quite the show over the weekend. Brandon, why don't you break it down? Both the launch would be interesting to hear about, and also what's going on in California.
So on October 13th, SpaceX launched its Starship vehicle for the 5th time. And when the first stage, the booster, returned back to the Earth, it was caught by what Elon calls Mechazilla. So basically, like, these two chopstick-like arms caught the booster in midair. And it was the very first time they tried it. It was the very first time anybody has ever tried it with a rocket of this size in history. And it was successful. The Starship itself flew way past the Kármán line, so it made it to space, came back down, successful reentry, dropped into the ocean close to a prepositioned buoy. So basically, the 5th Starship was like a massive success.
People were excited about it. It was cool to watch how many people were stoked about this. I think this one takes a little bit of imagination. You need to understand that this is like going to Mars. That's why this is important. And under a possible Trump administration, we could talk about that in a bit. I think it might happen. Trump's all about these big, symbolic gestures and things. And if Trump could get some people to Mars, that he's going to try and do that. Like, that is just, I think, the way.
I mean, it's kind of worth going over, like, why would you catch a rocket too?
Yeah.
And the reason is because of the reusability situation. Reusability becomes way, way, way faster. So normally, when you land a rocket, let's say on like a drone ship in the ocean, or you land it with legs on the ground, it takes between 2 to 4 weeks to get that booster ready again for another launch. So you've got to like inspect it, and it takes like multiple weeks sometimes to move these boosters back to another launch pad. And what SpaceX wants to do is they want to catch the booster, refuel it, add payload, and launch it from the same thing that they caught it from. So this would take like turnaround time from 2 weeks to 2 hours. Right. So this is actually a very important step in the reusability issue of the rocket, which ultimately means that we get more payload into orbit faster, and then we get obviously a base on Mars quicker. The more payload we can get up quicker.
It also, I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson talking a bit about how Elon and SpaceX haven't done anything that NASA hasn't done. And even before this weekend, that wasn't true. They've massively reduced the cost of launch, which has enabled something like Starlink, which is, when you decrease the cost of launch, you can increase the number of things orbiting the Earth. And now you have this massive constellation of satellites that is going to connect the whole world to the internet. And that wasn't possible economically before they did this. It's weird to me how much they want to discredit what is just unambiguous good in the world. I don't know how they can't compartmentalize these things either, because I don't have a problem with that. Clearly, we were just talking about Kamala's. We are even in the like embodiment of an actual political creature. It is possible to say like, I like these things about them, and I don't like these things about them. But they can't even do this about a man who's not running for office. He is a private citizen who is now, increasingly politically. I mean, he's campaigning for Trump now. But it's just shocking to me that someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who ostensibly cares about these things, can't get behind them. What is going on in California?
Yeah, so the California Coastal Commission recently rejected a Space Force / Air Force application to increase its launches from the Vandenberg Space Force Base from 36 launches to 50 launches per year. The Space Force exclusively uses SpaceX for its launches. So this was basically an application to increase the number of SpaceX launches from 36 launches a year to 50 launches a year. Now I was looking into the issue, and it's funny in a way. And you kind of have to know a few things before understanding why what happened when they blocked it. So first off, like the Coastal Commission was established in the 70s, and it has basically total regulatory control over land use and public access along 100% of California's coastline. So their jurisdiction extends from like 3,000 feet to 5 miles inland. Right. So they control anything that can happen there. Now, yeah, pretty crazy, right? Now, an important distinction for this specific hearing that they had is that they treat the commission treats federal, quote unquote, federal agency activity differently from other activities. And basically they are more flexible with federal activity than they are with private activity. And the core of the commission's argument came down to their rejection of the distinction between SpaceX and the Air Force. They basically argued that these launches, this increased number of launches, actually is private activity, and it's not actually federal activity because SpaceX is involved, and because they say SpaceX benefits more than the Air Force, essentially. So that's the argument. I think it's a pretty crappy one. And so they voted 6-4 to not increase the number of launches from 36 to 50. And yesterday, I think Wednesday, Musk filed a lawsuit against the commission because during the meeting that they had during the hearing where they rejected the application, some of the commissioners basically cited Musk's politics during a relatively heated conversation. One of the commissioners said Musk has aggressively injected himself into the presidential race. Another one criticized Musk for spewing and tweeting political falsehoods and attacking FEMA. So that's what's going on with the commission and with SpaceX.
How are they appointed? Are they appointed, these people?
So there's 12 commissioners, a few hundred staff. 6 of the commissioners are appointed. One of them is appointed by Newsom, and a few others are appointed by various departments, and the other 6 are elected by they're members of the public.
They're elected. I don't.
Yeah.
I lived in California for so long. I never remember seeing any. How long are the terms?
I don't know how long the terms are. I mean, it's kind of like most of the members, or the ones that are most outspoken, are like 55-year-old wine drinking moms. It's kind of funny, and they clearly all have Elon derangement syndrome. I've looked into some of their tweets, and
did you anything notable worth mentioning?
So one of the commissioners, Gretchen Newsom, who's not related to Gavin Newsom, I think she's actually the executive chair or something like that, one of the top ones in the commission. She actually criticized, I believe, Elon for spewing misinformation in that hearing, but I did notice that she tweeted, when the Project 2025 stuff was going around, she tweeted that this is Trump's plan and Trump owns Project 2025. So she's not totally immune from also spreading misinformation, quite frankly. But it's kind of just standard TDS.
Yeah, it seems pretty obviously another case of a mostly unelected group of people in government punishing their political enemies, and
they're also punishing the government right now. They're disallowing the government. So what the Space Force uses Starlink is, I think it's like for spy shit. Like they go up there and they send out a bunch of stuff, and it enables us to communicate in our operations around the globe and probably monitor our geopolitical enemies. And this commission is actually blocking them from increasing our capabilities in those areas.
This reminds me of the immigration situation, and we're going to talk about that now. These people have too much power. You should not be able to just thwart the will of the federal government on an issue of national security. And this is one of them in the case of the launches. And even if it wasn't, if it was like just our, economic prosperity, we need these launches to happen or something, like there are a lot of cases you can make. If the federal government wants it to happen, it just needs to happen. And I think there is a lot of room for states' rights type stuff, but only insofar as it doesn't hurt the rest of the country. Like it cannot actually, it cannot hurt Americans. Like I should not have to feel the weight of your decision, in Florida, if you make some crazy decision in California. And right now that seems to be the case. And that is especially the case. Maybe nowhere else is it more the case than in immigration. Riley, crime is up. And this is a multifaceted story. We're going to get to Trenda Aragua in a second. Our new friends, our new neighbors from Venezuela. Thank you, Kamala and Joe. We'll talk about crime first and the way the FBI manipulated the data. That was a crazy story.
Yeah, sure thing. So in the realm of America drifting closer to the purge. So in the first, this story, before we get to the Trend de Aragua, Real Clear Investigations did an expose where they were able to determine that the FBI had stealth edited crime data from 2022 to reflect that the rate of violent crime was actually much higher than it actually was. So last September, the FBI came out with their supposed final crime data from 2022, showing that the rate of violent crime was down 2.1%. USA Today, and I would assume other outlets, ran headlines based on that data saying violent crime was down in America. Turns out a little over 3 weeks ago, I guess, the FBI had actually revised those numbers in a massive way, now stating that the rate of violent crime had increased 4.5% in 2022, which is not like an accounting error. It's a huge swing. and they made no announcement of it. I guess just like a little footnote on their website saying this is what accounted for it. But a crazy 6-point swing that they just didn't announce.
You know, there's something about being gaslit for so long where, I mean, that's really what's happening here is you look around and you think, and I mean, my gut is things are better now than they were in 2022 and 2021. But, you know, I remember for years looking around and being like, things are worse. Things are much worse in the cities. And just being screamed at by these crazy people who insisted that crime was down. There's a whole, you know, crime narrative, I guess, that comes from the social justice and let's say criminal justice left. These are people who believe that criminals are really mistreated in a way that is awful. They think it's mostly racially motivated, and they think that it's their duty, therefore, to liberalize the system. And I kind of I don't agree with them at all, but I do understand where they're coming from and maybe why they think this is important. I just think that our safety is more important, and it's been crazy to watch not just the crime increase, but our inability to be able to discuss the crime. One of the things that this is linked to now, I mean, on the topic of crime and crime increasing and like just trusting your eyes, is the New York City crime. And specifically, did you follow the trend story at all? The one in, do you want to tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, sure thing. So simultaneously, while you have this, you know, the FBI just massively amending their crime data without telling anyone, you have this story that you wrote about in the Daily Solana, where I guess 20 juvenile members of the Tren de Aragua gang, so the same gang that took over the apartment complex in Colorado, I believe, doing the same thing in New York City, this time at a hotel that was reserved for migrants, where they have been committing armed robberies, brandishing knives, and then posting about the crimes on their like government issued phones, which I have to say, I think that part is actually a good thing, that they're actually documenting all the criminality, because as we know from the other story, we can't really trust the FBI to do that part. So good thing that they are, I guess.
It's out of control now. I mean, it's been out of control for a while. The evidence now is in front of us. We should not be paying. This should not be happening because we should not be paying for them to be here. If it's like one thing to have a de facto open border situation, it's quite another to be actively paying people to live here. You have government funded housing. You have, let's say, no. You have taxpayer funded housing. You have taxpayer funded phones. You have taxpayer funded food, healthcare, education. All of that is what you get when you're here. So clearly there's an incentive even for regular good people who want to come here and get all that free shit. Like I understand that if you're coming from a shittier place, you want all the good stuff. But now also we're doing it for the criminals. You have a massive gang roaming the streets, robbing people. We need to be able to deport them. And the reason that we can't deport them is because New York City is run by people who hate you. It is a sanctuary city, which means they don't have to work with ICE at all. And that has to end. New York City cannot be making decisions like this because their decisions on immigration those people can go anywhere. They can leave New York City and hop over to Jersey. And then it's like my mom lives in that state. Like you cannot have one small group of crazy people in City Hall in New York City making enormous immigration decisions for 350 million people. That is bananas. That is the reason that our federal government exists. Like, if I can't even, what even is a nation without a border? Like, that is maybe, you have to even have a border before you can talk about national defense, because what are you defending if not a border? Like the government in a sense is the border. They are responsible for this, and these people need to lose quite a bit of power in the states in stuff like this, and in stuff like, to a lesser degree, but a still significant degree, the Elon Musk stuff. The federal government has to be making this decision. It has to be empowered to make this decision. We need to abolish these sanctuary city laws. We need to drive all of these people out of politics, but at the very least, if we abolish the sanctuary city laws at the federal level, then we will have the ability to deport these criminals, which is what has to happen. Not just them also, by the way, like they have these are juveniles, which means they have parents who are allowing this. That is not the kind of parent that we need in the country. It's like they all have to go. They really like all need to go.
I wonder what explains the fact that there are gangs coming here from south of the border, that's not, you don't, it's hard to imagine gangs fleeing their own country because that's where the turf is. Like are cartels sending gangs up into the States to establish, drug trafficking networks? Like, what is it's strange to hear that there's, full on gangs are being imported into the States. It seems pretty alarming and hard to understand. In the case of Tren
in New York City, a lot of it is happening recently. Like, they weren't even gangs because they're juveniles, right? Like, they're recruiting and the gangs are growing. So maybe there was some of that came over for whatever reason, and then it's just been growing while here. And I just don't want to have to worry about it. I don't have to think about it. And I would like, the people who have been elected to take care of it. And that begins with getting rid of these sanctuary city laws. Again, because I shouldn't have to worry about who's coming in and staying in my country, because a very small minority of crazy people really want them to be here. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not how it's not how we're going to do it. What we have to get to is the quarterfinal of Pirate Idol. Hit it. Welcome back to the greatest show on the internet and the last quarterfinal round, the final quarterfinal round. So next week we begin the semifinals, and then we take a break off for Hereticon, and then we're back with the semifinals. But this is the last one. It is a great group. We've got Kevin, Olivia, and Andrew back in the chat. A great topic, which I know this is about you guys to a certain extent, but they're always a little bit about me because I can't help myself. And I have a lot of thoughts on this one. We got to talk about Columbus Day. Riley, break the story down for us.
Sure thing, folks. So this past Monday was a holiday, but which holiday it was depends largely on who you ask. Proud Italian-American Andrew Cuomo joined most Republicans in honoring Columbus Day, while Democrats instead opted for Indigenous Peoples Day, with Kamala Harris stating on the campaign trail while commemorating the occasion, European explorers ushered in a wave of devastation, violence, stealing land, and widespread disease.
Andy, did you follow this story at all while it was happening?
A little bit. What do you
think?
Okay, so...
Well, first of all, before we even start, did you celebrate Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, or neither? Who knows? That might be one of your takes. I bet it is.
Well, I didn't have a big backyard barbecue, but I'm definitely on the Columbus Day side. So I have got another schizo take for you guys this
I'm here for
time. Okay. Have you heard the name Yuri Bezmenov?
That sounds familiar. What?
Kevin has. Okay, so Yuri Bezmenov was a former KGB agent that sat down, in 1984 for a TV interview, and he described this strategy by the Soviet Union of, ideological subversion of the United States. And it consisted of 4 stages, right? So, demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization. And, this is pretty clearly part of the demoralization stage. I don't know, if you look at current events, we're pretty advanced through all these stages, as a matter of fact. But this is definitely part of demoralization. And the demoralization stage consisted of undermining the society's, moral and ideological framework. And the way you do this is you would capture the educational, the media, and the cultural institutions and inject ideologies that cause people to, sort of lose their mooring to traditional values and stuff like that. And, one result of this, of course, is going to be societal division. As you can see, right? I mean, we have one half of the country that celebrates Columbus Day and another half that celebrates Indigenous Peoples Day.
But I want to back up a little bit. Who is, I agree it's I feel demoralized. I've been success to whoever is responsible for the demoralization. But that's my question. Who do you think is doing this? The Soviet Union's gone. Is it right? Is it just, it seems like the Democrats just actually want to do this. Do you think they maybe absorbed the culture somehow? And now it's this runaway. It actually, while you were talking, I was thinking of another Soviet era thing, which was the Dead Hand Project. Are you guys familiar with this? So the Dead Hand Project was an automated nuclear defense system that would activate without any humans if the Soviet Union was nuked. It was designed to launch all of its nukes at America. And so, they almost ended the entire world. And this feels like that sort of this old Soviet strategy, perhaps, that maybe is still, even though the Soviet Union's gone, it's still a threat. It's still out there. But how is it out there? What do you describe how it's out there?
Well, so I was gonna, the way I like to think of it is it's a mimetic warfare weapon, and they detonated it back in the Cold War, and it's still exploding now. To use another metaphor, it's like a sort of like a virus bomb, right? I mean, you set this thing off, and these things just sort of spread throughout society and throughout, just sort of the, the mimetic, zeitgeist or whatever. And it doesn't require any tending. It's a fire and forget weapon.
I will add a little context, and then I want to get, Olivia, I would love your take. But I noticed that, because I've been following the Columbus Day drama for a while. I'm very keyed in. And the Washington Post just 2 years ago, I believe it was 2 years ago, it might have been last year, had a whole Columbus Day spread. It was, multiple articles about the oppression of the Indigenous Americans and how bad Columbus was. And it was like a feature that they offered. And amidst all of that the Indigenous Peoples Day even got started and, or got, I said, the federal stamp of approval from, I believe it was Biden, but it was worse then, it seems to me. It seems like this year, more people, maybe this could be just a product of Twitter being run by Elon Musk now, but what I was seeing was way more support for Columbus Day than ever before. And also the mainstreaming of the anti-Aztec memes, which are, speaking of memetics, very powerful. Very, Matt, pull one up. We got to see one of you. The here comes the right wing thing for the Aztec,
right.
who are, mass murdering everybody. Not just mass murdering. This is a human sacrifice culture. River Page, who used to work at Pirewires, wrote a great piece about this that you should check out. Matt, you can also link that in the bio. But that's become, a really evocative meme. It's like anytime someone goes after Columbus now, there's this massive backlash of people who are like, actually, he liberated the South Americans. You weren't seeing that a couple years ago. Olivia, what's your take? Wait, pause. The moon should be a state shirt. Phenomenal choice. Amazing. Love it. Do you mind showing people the back really quick? Because I've been seeing this now. This star, let's fucking go. That's for the moon. We did that. That was a Pirate Wires innovation in the sort of internet, arena. And now I see it done by other people for other states. It's it is a meme. I think it's a growing meme. And the moon should be a state, but that's a topic for another day. Sorry I cut you off, but I was excited. Take it from the top.
No problem. Yeah. So I did a lot of research actually about who Columbus was. Cause I think also what happens is we get this information from the left and people just believe it at face value. And part of that I think is a test to see how many lies they can get away with telling. Cause this will be useful for them for the future, perhaps. Anyway. So Columbus was an Italian. He grew up in a seafaring family. And he got this idea in his 30s that he could reach Asia by traveling west across the Atlantic instead of traditionally going east. So he spends 7 years trying to secure funding for this journey. which is an incredible amount of persistence. He finally secures his Series A from the Queen and King of Spain, and they provide him all the ships, all the supplies, all the crew to go. Within 2 months, he reaches the Bahamas, which nobody knew that was there. That was not on his maps. And by the way, he had to use like celestial navigating and like dead reckoning and all these archaic naval strategies. Like, he was truly a master of his craft. And the fact that he didn't die is a miracle in and of itself. So then he lands, which, by the way, it's like if you're the only investor in a Series A round, and then they like million X your return as the investor within 2 months. So one other side note too, he secures for himself, he has to claim any lands that he discovers for the country of Spain, and he gets a small profit of resources, but he also secured the title for himself of Admiral of the Ocean Sea, which is just a sick title. So I give him his props for that. Anyway, he gets there and he has very detailed journals, which are full of thoughtful observations on the people, their way of life. And he has very friendly interactions with the Native Americans. Like, based on how the left acts, you'd think he was this bloodthirsty Indian killer that just wanted to destroy their way of life, but it's not true. He spent time trading with them, learning about their way of life. He was also a Christian missionary. Part of his goal was to convert these people to his faith, which he held very dear. And so I think it's like, when I look at who Columbus was, I'm inspired and I'm motivated. And like, that is the beauty of the American spirit, which I don't feel that way celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. I think the left wants us to feel guilty about that day. And, I don't have a lot of remorse for the actions of my ancestors. I didn't do those things.
Yeah.
I don't expect my children to.
They weren't even most of our ancestors. Like, the white people generally have inherited the sins of like every group of white people that have ever existed. Right. But like, you're super diverse. And like, what were I'm half Spanish. So I guess probably there were some conquistadors back there. But generally speaking, like, why is a German responsible for what Columbus did, or like a British person responsible for what Columbus did? I've never understood that. It's like this strange white identity thing that they really, really want us to have.
Totally. I just look at Columbus, I'm so inspired. Like, he was a man of faith and conviction. He worked so hard. He was a businessman. He was an investor. And I think it's actually really damaging to take away Columbus Day for the American zeitgeist.
Well, I mean, wasn't there some bad stuff? I have not looked into this that deeply because I don't think it actually matters, and I have a take on it in a second. But wasn't there wasn't sex slavery stuff or something, or like, I mean, there was no mass murder? I just have absorbed the stories from them, so I'm assuming there's some pretty gnarly stuff.
There's another problem, which is like pinning all of the issues with colonialism on one man in Columbus. He didn't actually spend much time in the West Indies. And I think in his journals, you can see that like he saw the potential for Native Americans to be doing labor, like mining silver and gold, to be sent back to Spain. But I don't think Columbus was personally like raping or killing all of these Native Americans to the degree that, they would want us to believe.
I actually don't. I think that the grievance holidays I have a problem with. I have a problem with national holidays that exist to remind you that you're bad. I don't think they're necessary. Don't think we need them. I think we were better without them across the board, like all of them. They would get rid of all of the grievance holidays. I think it is important to have a version of history that we tell ourselves, especially kids, that is heroic and good, which is maybe the core conflict here. Separate from the possible Soviet Union mimetic warfare, it's like this difference in opinion on how we should tell our own story. And it seems the left is very, very obsessed with the real story of the Three Little Pigs or something. Like, they want to tell the story of the big bad wolf. They want that to be there. Like, where was he coming from? And I think the right generally is like, it doesn't matter. Like, I think the average right-winger doesn't think that like colonialists were perfect. Like there was a lot of problems and a lot of horrible things, but also the reality is the Aztec Empire was probably the most evil empire in the history of the world, or that we have a record of. It's like shit's complicated, and we are never going to know what really happened in the past. We have just stories that have been handed down, written and passed down, and so you have to. What you really glean in this really a perfect story, this perfect conflict between these two worldviews and these two ways of looking at America is a tell into how people think about America today. And, you know, the left really thinks that we're terrible and the world would be better without us. And the right really thinks sort of like the opposite. And there are extreme versions of that get more and more extreme as you go. I don't care if like the version of Columbus that we celebrate is a little bit fake, because I think all history, like everything that we get handed down is a little bit fake. And like you have to frame it. Everything that we do in the news, every story that we tell is framed by our own judgments and biases. And like everyone's life, Columbus's life was so long. Every colonial American was like, you have decades and decades that you have to weigh and decide like, what do you emphasize and what do you not? And when you're leaving things on the cutting room floor, you are always going to be emphasizing something over another thing. And I think that's fine and expected. I would like to just introduce one sort of anti-Columbus Day perspective, which is it's sort of our first, I think it might be the first woke holiday. This was done for Italian Americans, right? This wasn't done because it was like, oh, he discovered North America. I don't think he might not have even have known that North America existed. He certainly never went there. He did discover the Americas, but the existence of the day was, I believe it was FDR who created it, and he did so it's like an identity day, which is why Italian Americans in New York City get so fucking mad about it, because it's their day. It's like, that's the day that they have. And I think the left kind of, maybe all of us like lost sight of that because it's so ingrained in the American identity now, is the story of Christopher Columbus. It was like a successful early woke psyop. And we think that's just, you know, what it is. We forgot about the origin, but the Italian Americans did not. They were like, no. That is a day for us. And you are taking it away and giving it to another aggrieved minority group. That's, I think, an interesting piece. Kevin, what do you make of this? Or you guys can also push back or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, Columbus probably equal parts, thumbs up and thumbs down. Probably the same thing with the Indigenous Americans. I don't really care one way or another. What I do care about is the United States now and our leadership. So if you go on the Department of Commerce website, there are 11 federally recognized holidays. One of them is Columbus Day. There is no mention of Indigenous Peoples Day, yet the Democratic nominee for president, who presumably could be running our country, doesn't recognize the federal holiday and instead recognizes the holiday that was created to protest against that federal holiday.
So the Indigenous Peoples thing is not, Biden didn't actually make that a national holiday at all? That's just a complete, I know some states have. So is that just like we're all reacting to the work of some states that have done this?
I think so. Yeah. Unless the federal government is just really bad at updating their website, which very well could be the case. But it's just odd to me that we're sold this idea that, you know, Biden-Harris administration are like the restorer of norms. It doesn't seem normal to me that the potential president is, you know, not following federal holidays and sort of adhering to that norm. But honestly, it's odd to me. I was reading about 2020. There were 33 statues of Columbus that were ripped down in 2020. And I don't really like the idea that the president of the United States is associated with that movement that's tearing down statues and rioting in the streets. It just doesn't seem like a very positive and inspiring message. I don't see the joy. I'm not getting joy from that.
It does not bring me any joy. I will say, just on a little fact note here, it's not a federal holiday, but it has been recognized by the Biden administration. So that's the big thing, where states were doing it previously, then the Biden administration recognized it. It's officially, you're right, not a federal holiday. So it is crazy, not crazy. It's just very, very notable. What I picked up on online was you had Democrats celebrating one holiday, Republicans celebrating another holiday publicly for a reason. They're not just, these are not just different names. Okay. One of the holidays is a celebration of European explorers who then colonized the Americas. And the other holiday is implicitly an indictment of that entire thing, that entire chapter of European history, and a celebration of cultures that no longer exist. Okay, like we don't know what, there were hundreds of, probably maybe thousands, but certainly hundreds of different cultures in the Americas, most of which have been lost now. And like, what are we actually celebrating? Really, if you like break it down, like what is the celebration there? Well, it doesn't even matter for the purpose of this conversation. The notable thing is that you have a real bifurcation culturally that I think is alarming, to have, half the country celebrating literally not a different name for a holiday, but a different holiday on the same day. I don't think there's a precedent for that in American history. And it, to me, is, it's funny to talk about the Columbus Day stuff, and the culture war stuff is like, kind of always fun to dip a toe into. But there is I think it's really dangerous for what the Democrats have done here by purposely putting the day on Columbus Day. You're inviting perpetual rage. Once a year, all we know that's going to happen on Columbus Day every single year for as long as this double day exists is people are going to be mad at each other, and the country will be divided. It's like a day that exists now for division in America. That's actually what the holiday is. It's like a culture war holiday. And they did that. They purposely did that. That is really, I think, a tell of where we are as a country right now. It's a super culturally divided country, and it's all along political lines.
It's also like such a clear difference to like what the intention of the holiday is, which is guilt and division. Like November is actually Native American Heritage Month. So a whole month dedicated to celebrating those cultures, which is awesome. Like they have really cool parts of those cultures that it's great for people to learn more about, and people who still identify, as Native American, like they want to celebrate that. That's awesome. So it couldn't have been like, hey, just a reminder, like Native American Heritage Month is next month. No, it's like we put this on this day, and our goal is to make things crazy.
Yeah, it's obviously intentional. I mean, it's, again, it's all about undermining our national story. The sort of the myths and stories of a nation are essential to it, essential to your cohesion. If we can't agree on certain things, then, what exactly are we, right? I mean, are we just a bunch of people who happen to live in the same place, or are we a people, right?
Antonio, a friend of mine, Antonio Garcia Martinez, I've talked to him a bit about some of these topics, and he said, we're no longer a country, we're just an economy. And that's how people treat it. They come here and they treat it that way. And that's
interesting.
Like the nation of it all is, to your point, Andy, is like really been taken out of us.
Yeah. And I honestly, how can you see this as anything less than intentional though? I mean, it's when they're, teaching kids to be ashamed of our history, to feel guilty for things that, prior generations did. You're tearing down statues of, not only Confederate generals, but also founding fathers and stuff.
And Union generals. Grant was torn down in San Francisco. I'll never forget it because I had the bio already. He was already my guy on Twitter. Right. And I was like, you did what? You did what to who? Because he was racist? Yeah. What do you have to do to not be called racist in this country? The man freed the slaves. He won. Right. He defeated the Confederates. And they're like, fuck this guy. If that's the line, it's like, they're never letting me into the pearly gates. If it's like, Solana, not even Grant gets a pass.
I mean, the only conclusion can be, right, that they just want to tear down the past. And, the idea being that you tear down the past, you can replace it with something else, and then you control the future. Yeah, right. He controls the past, controls the future. So
unburdened by what has been. It's we're headed. I'm really worried that they're coming for Thanksgiving next. I really like Thanksgiving, and I think that is like ripe. That's ripe for the taking for them. Like this story that the Indians and the Pilgrims were there eating together and celebrating together, they're going to come after that and rip it apart. And it's going to be, we're going to be made to feel guilty on that day. I just want to eat turkey, watch football with my family, but I really think it's, I don't know.
They have been I guess the way that they've gotten at it previously has just been to the warning stories about your Thanksgiving uncle.
Right.
Like, everyone's got this dirtbag Thanksgiving uncle, and this is how you talk about politics with him. And I realized recently, like, I've got a bunch of nieces and I got a nephew now, and like,
you are the uncle.
I'm the uncle. I'm the dirtbag.
I'm the uncle too.
That they have to worry about, and they should fucking worry. By the way, like, now on my table, no one's taking me down. But the like Native American piece, I've seen them bringing it up a bit. They no longer do this stuff. From what I've been told about people who have kids in school, like, we used to do the story of like the Native Americans, like, helping the Pilgrims with food, and they sat down together. We would like shake butter. Like, all of that has been taken away, certainly in liberal states. That they already are getting rid of the myth of it all. But the myth, to your earlier point, Andy, about we need myths, like, that is what I was talking about with it. Like, it doesn't matter exactly what he did. There is an idea of Columbus that exists beyond the facts of his life. Just like there's an idea of the founding fathers, certainly, like the George Washington, like, who even was he? It doesn't matter. Like, he is the totemic father figure of the country. And we all have a sense of that story in our mind. And it's much more important than like the minutia of his day-to-day existence. It's like, that is the thing, that story, that myth is the thing that keeps us all together. And you'd have to be very, 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 very dim to not understand that. And I think that most of the people responsible for this stuff do understand that. And they want to destroy those myths. They want to erase what it is to be an American. And like you said, to rewrite it. I don't know that they're going to win though. Like I said, there's so much pushback now. There's
a lot of backlash. Yeah. I mean, it's really heartening, actually. I mean, I remember, it wasn't really even that long ago that you would hear them saying all this stuff and you never got to hear any pushback, right? Because, I mean, at least before Twitter, there wasn't any real sort of big public forum where people could push back against that. It was just all in the news and you had your varying things on CNN and MSNBC, and then you had, your boomers on Fox News or whatever. And, but then, Twitter comes along and, obviously before Elon bought it, it was a forum for all, a lot of the worst of this crap. But now that Elon is in control of Twitter and we can actually hear it, I mean, yeah, you get this pushback, and I think you realize that it's been there all along. Like, really not everybody was buying this nonsense.
I think what we really need to save the holiday, though, is no one's ever going to, let's talk like tactics here. No one is ever going to care about the importance of a founding myth or anything like that. What you really need is tradition that is fun, that people like. And you need to think of some interesting, like, maybe on Columbus Day, you get on a boat or you make a boat and, like, I don't even know, but like something, you get drunk on a boat, like maybe it's a boat holiday. Maybe you just like, you need like a subtle rebrand. Now it's a boat holiday, or now it's like, I don't know, what else did Columbus, did he really get syphilis? Maybe it's a sex holiday. I don't know, but like you need something, because it can't just be like a day about a guy that I think is bad and I'm too lazy to Wikipedia it. So that's what we need. We need to figure it out. Thanksgiving, we'll never lose Thanksgiving because you got the table. We'll never lose Christmas because you got the tree and Santa Claus. And what we really all need to do is put our thinking hats on and think of some new traditions that we can celebrate on Columbus Day. What are you, last thoughts, guys? I mean, traditions in mind, if not thoughts on Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day, thoughts on the future, like the direction that this goes and the future of America.
So the most worrying part of this to me is that if we just kind of return to my Bezmenov thing, is that one thing he said was that the process of demoralization was irreversible. And I don't know if I completely agree with that. It certainly has been proceeding apace, I think. But just talking about how big a backlash there's been is, again, it's heartening. But I think the real strategy is just to do what the lefties did. And you have to like take back the institutions. That's the only way to really do this stuff. You've got to take back education. You've got to take back media, which we're kind of having some success at. And you've got to take back culture. And, you know, I'm not going to pretend to know how to accomplish those things, but it's got to start there.
So I grew up in Texas, and Columbus Day was also State Fair of Texas Day. We got a free fair ticket when we were students, and we got to go to the fair. So I think we should move forward in that direction, and just everybody, however you name that day, just try to go have some fun, and we can all get along and have a good time. Whitetail.
Yeah. Wants joy.
There you go.
My man says pushing joy.
Olivia, any Columbus Day traditions? How did you celebrate Columbus Day?
How would I, or how did I?
How should we all?
I mean, food, that's very American. We need a lot of food. And I think a great way to, like Andy said, taking back institutions. I'd love to see a lot more homeschools pop up. Teach kids in the home what Columbus Day is all about.
And that's what we'll do. Well, not me, because I don't have any kids yet. But if we make Columbus Day a sex holiday, maybe there's a path for me. Guys, it's been real. Vote. Actually, everyone who's watching, I would love to know what Columbus Day traditions we should have. Sound off in the comments. Tell us what a great tradition for Columbus Day would be. Tell us who you would like to hear more from. Kevin, Olivia, or Andy, all back in the chat for the quarterfinals. It's been real. Have a great weekend, guys. That's all I've got. Goodbye.